at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History, we rely on a network of collaborations with people and institutions from around the world to explore major questions in human origins and societal change.
These global partnerships span dozens of countries and allow us to combine cutting-edge field and laboratory analyses to formulate new ways of understanding the past.
On this web series, we'll talk with our international partners to hear about their interest in archaeology, their research, and their vision for the sustainability of archaeological research in the future.
This is ArchaeoChats.
Welcome to ArchaeoChats. I'm your host, Emma Finestone, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Padalano, and today we're welcoming Dr. Grace Barretto-Tesoro all the way from the Philippines. Grace is an associate professor at the Archaeological Studies Program at the University of the Philippines. Grace is also a member of the Society of Philippine Archaeologists Incorporated. She received her PhD in archaeology from the University of Cambridge. Her research focuses on the materialization of Philippine indigenous beliefs, and she currently heads a project on human adaptation and climate change in the past, and has teamed up with researchers at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History to understand pre-colonial and colonial impacts on tropical forests as a key member of the ERC-funded project Panthropocene, headed by our own Dr. Patrick Roberts. Grace, thanks so much for joining us, and we were wondering, as a first question, if you could tell us a little about how you got involved in archaeology and how your interests developed over the course of your career.
The people from my generation, or archaeologists from my generation, would always cite the Indiana Jones movies as a great inspiration in when they decided what kind of career they wanted to follow. But I think for me, it was earlier than that. Although I did not know, I did not have a name yet to what I wanted to do, but I was interested in different cultures. When I was young, my family spent a year in Papua New Guinea. My father had worked there, and we would join or we would participate and watch local events, would include participation from the local groups. And that's when I became interested in knowing about other people, because when I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old at the time, and it was a surprise for me to know that there are other people aside from Filipinos, and I wanted to know more about them. I mean, because the dancers or the people who were performing in these events, they wore colorful garments, and the headdress were wonderful and colorful too. And for an 8-year-old, I just wanted to know why they were different from us and what made them special also, because they were the highlight of the shows that we went to. And at the same time, when I was growing up, I just wanted to be different in the sense that I don't want to work in an office. I wanted to go on field works. I wanted to be always out and see the world. And I think that's the main reason why I wanted to do archaeology. Archaeology in the Philippines is fairly new as an academic discipline. Although we have a department of anthropology at the University of the Philippines, archaeology was not a dominant course because the focus was on the social, on cultural anthropology and physical anthropology. And so archaeology as a separate unit was only established in the mid-1990s. So the Archaeological Studies Program is on its 26th year now. Compared to other academic units of archaeology in Southeast Asia and rest of the world, it's fairly young.
Awesome. So what has been some of your favorite projects you've been involved with or worked on in your career?
So after my PhD, I was able to excavate of course, with a team from the Archaeological Studies Program. We excavated 2 stone base houses and the old church complex of a town south of Manila. And apart from that, I think every archaeological excavation for me is is an accomplishment. The discovery process is exciting, of course, when you get to know more about the site through the analysis of objects and through the analysis of features. And whenever you do an excavation, when you get to understand what we're excavating and the relationship of what you're excavating with the other features in the other trenches, and you get to know more about the site through this, I think that's for me is a great accomplishment. Just the process of discovery is whatever it is, as long as you create knowledge and you produce knowledge and you get to know more about the past, is for me is a great accomplishment.
Great. Yeah, so we interview archaeologists from all over the world, and it's interesting how everybody has very similar answers that are relative to their own like region or discipline, but everyone always says first that they don't want to work in a desk job and they want to go out and see the world. That's always part of the reason we all become archaeologists. And then also just it's so hard to pick one favorite project or discovery, because I feel like we're all the types of people who every single new project that you work on is like we're motivated by that sort of discovery. So they're all exciting, and it's just great to like see the world through our jobs. So I've read some of your publications. I've looked at them, especially in preparation for the interview. You have a lot of publications, and so a lot of your research focuses on the pre-colonial period. Can you talk a little bit about why that period is important and why that's become your research focus?
Because we know when the Spanish came in the 16th century, the missionaries, of course, they viewed the Philippines through their own lenses, through their own perspective. But we do know more about the Philippines from the 16th century onwards because of what the missionaries and other Europeans wrote about the Philippines. We don't know much about pre-16th century Philippines, and that's why I'm interested in the pre-colonial archaeology. And it also explains, I think it's also a source of explanation of how early Filipinos view the world, and we can also bridge gaps or explain what we see right now through archaeology. So that's why I think, for me, I think all periods are important, but in my research interest is I focus on pre-colonial archaeology.
So building off of that, you're one of the most essential members of Patrick Roberts' Panthropocene project that Emma had mentioned earlier on. And you work alongside Patrick, Rebecca Hamilton, Max Finley, Yoshi Maizumi, myself, and others from around the world on this project. And I know COVID has sort of delayed some of the field work a little bit. But can you just talk about how you first met Patrick, how you came to team up with him, and then how you got involved with the project itself?
I met Patrick through Noel Amano, who also works at the Max Planck Institute. Noel was a former student of mine, and I taught the field school that he attended. So he was part of the team that excavated one of the stone-based houses in the town that I mentioned a while ago. So he sent me an email asking if I would be interested in collaborating with a colleague from MPI, who happened to be Patrick. So we had a Skype meeting, and Patrick sent a draft of the proposal. We met in 2018 in the Indo-Pacific Prehistory Association conference in Vietnam, and we had a series of meetings online, and that's how I met Patrick. We are interested in the same time period and research questions, though we had different approaches, because he was more interested in on land use, the impact of Spanish colonization on land use via the introduction of plants and animals from the New World to the Philippines, and of course frame in the idea of the Panthropocene. Whereas I'm interested in the impact of Spanish colonization on social aspects. So what was the response of the local population when the Spanish came, and what was the response of the local population to the changes made through the royal decrees. So I wanted to focus on the locals um, as active members of the society, of the colonial society, rather than as passive recipients of what the Spanish were bringing in. So, and I wanted to see how we can investigate this through the material evidence from the colonial period. So, the project funds four research associates who are expected to finish or to complete a thesis or a dissertation that, of course, would contribute to the answering the objectives of the project. We have two historians. So apart from the RAs, we have two historians, a zooarchaeologist, and myself, who are all connected to Philippine universities and who will supervise the research arts associates. The research associates have the freedom to choose what topics they would do or investigate in their PhDs or masters, as long as it will answer the objectives of the project.
Great. I know you've been vocal in the past about the need to grow archaeology locally, especially because it's a relatively new field in the Philippines, and the need to have a pool of local archaeologists available for each province, or just a wider variety of people from different parts in order to grow the field in the future. And these types of issues are relevant to archaeology everywhere. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about that.
Right now, archaeologists in the Philippines are either working for the National Museum of the Philippines or at the Archaeological Studies Program at the University of the Philippines, where I belong to, or where I teach. Um, there are other universities who employ graduates of archaeology, but in a non-archaeology discipline, such as behavioral studies, the social sciences, or the Department of Anthropology. So the University of the Philippines is the only educational institution that offers archaeology as a degree. And because um, of this, we are all staying in Manila. So um, the one thing that I really want to happen in the future is, apart from the establishment of other academic units in other universities, is to have an archaeologist attached to a municipality or a town, sort of a resident archaeologist who will be, of course, paid by the government. And the reason why I would like this to happen is it's to minimize site destruction. Right now, when a site is reported because of commercial development or because of quarrying or mining activities or any sort of earth moving activities, um, although you get to see them on social media and it's on the news, it's reported in the National Museum. But generally, when I say we, both the National Museum and the University of the Philippines, although we have increasing numbers from the 1990s, um, we are still few in terms of catering or answering or looking after the archaeology of the entire country. So if you have a pool, or let's say, if you have an archaeologist, one or two attached to a municipality, and I think that would help in the protection of sites and in educating the public about the significance of why archaeological sites should be protected, should be conserved. It will, of course, deepen the history of the place. Um, and, of course, it would contribute to the heritage or to the archaeological heritage tourism of the town. And it can be viewed by, or it will be viewed by the public as separate from treasure hunting, because right now, even you get to um, meet educated individuals who still view archaeology as a form of treasure hunting. And I think that is one of the major obstacles we face as archaeologists when we go to a site, especially when we go to a site and the team would include foreigners or foreign archaeologists. So if we have more archaeologists working in different parts of the Philippines, um, outside of the academic setting, I think it would greatly benefit the discipline.
So Manila has nearly 2 million people as a population. So I can imagine it being pretty competitive for university age students. I don't know what the percentage of the population is university aged, but I imagine with recent discoveries like Homo luzonensis, that the interest in archaeology is increasing in the Philippines. But at the same time, it must be pretty difficult to get into the archaeology program. Um, have recent discoveries like Homo luzonensis generated excitement in the country for archaeology? But is there an issue with training the next generation? Do you just not have the capacity, or?
In recent years, many of the students who applied to the Archaeological Studies Program have cited the discovery of the Homo luzonensis as the inspiration why they decided to join ASP, or the Archaeological Studies Program. So the ASP offers graduate courses only. So you need to have a baccalaureate degree for you to enter the diploma program or the master's program. And you also have a PhD program. So the public that is acquainted, that the public that is familiar with archaeology, I think there's a very small fraction of it that understands the archaeological process and what archaeology is. But with the recent discoveries, not just of course of the Homo luzonensis, but there are many newspapers or other publications, popular publications that would discuss archaeology. I think those are um, it's one way to reach the public, and it's also a way to change their opinion about what archaeology is. I mentioned earlier that many people would equate archaeology with treasure hunting, and with the recent discovery and more articles on the heritage, archaeological heritage of the Philippines, I think we are on our way to changing public perception, but it will still take a long time. So, to be honest, I think the change is minimal in terms of how people view archaeology, but we have many graduates who are who have decided to do archaeology outside of the university, meaning they don't want to teach in the university, but they want to do more of an applied archaeology, not necessarily an archaeological impact assessment or contract archaeology, but they want to do archaeological heritage education through creative ways, and that is not restricted to a formal class setting. So I'm hoping that in the coming years we get to have more archaeologists, formally trained archaeologists who would get in touch or would contact or do more public archaeology. Because people from the archaeologists from my generation are all university based, and of course I value, or many we value the academic setting of archaeology, but we need to get out and engage with the public, with the different kinds of publics, different sectors, different communities, for archaeology to be truly part of the average person's vocabulary. Because it's still I think many people still romanticize archaeology. And we have a few students who come into archaeology and then realize that it's not for them because it's different from how they understood it, and it's different from what they expected. And they thought it was all field work, and not realizing that you need to do laboratory work, you need to analyze and interpret and write reports. And it can be stressful for some individuals, and that's why they leave. And so you get a few dedicated ones. But I'm really hoping that in the coming years, more people would stay in archaeology and more people would do archaeology. And we can only do this if we also have if you can also establish other academic units in other universities.
I want to touch on something related to what you were saying about changing public perception of archaeology away from sort of treasure hunting to something that's more accurate, but also that is more of a shared heritage of the community that's not just coming from people on the outside. I saw you had a really creative way of engaging public archaeology through a photo essay that you published, which was intended to disseminate knowledge about archaeology to the general public through photos. I just came across it while I was preparing for this interview, and I know very little about it, but I just thought that was such a creative idea. So can you tell me a little more about this project, like how you came up with the idea and what it is exactly?
After an excavation, the practice is to give copies of the site reports to the landowners, to the property owners, and to the local government unit. And in the site that Noel Amano and I excavated, so when we gave the landowners were old people, so I think they're in their 70s at that time. So when I gave them a copy of the report, which obviously is a technical one because it's a site report, and it was written in English, he looked through it and said, I will just look at the photos because I cannot understand what it's written, and it's in a language that he didn't know much. And I think that was the inspiration for the photo essay. Because he just wanted to look at the photos, and I thought that if you can produce a publication that is to include many photos that is not technical, and hopefully that would avoid jargon, we can reach as many people as we can reach more people. We can reach archaeology enthusiasts, and that was the main reason for that project.
So you're doing all this great work, and you sort of touched upon this already. But where do you hope the field of archaeology goes in the Philippines in the next few years? Maybe beyond just having new universities or new programs teaching archaeology. Where do you really want to see the archaeology in the Philippines go?
In the Philippines, well, globally and in the Philippines, okay, I think the trend now is repatriation. A lot of Philippine materials are in foreign museums. And a few years ago, a friend of mine was in Spain, and he was there for a vacation. And part of the vacation was, part of his plan was to visit the different museums. And he didn't realize the quantity of materials from the Philippines that were displayed in both public and private museums. And that's just in Spain. Okay. We don't have an active repatriation program at the moment, but I think this is something that we should consider in the future. Globally and in the Philippines also, we are now starting to include marginalized voices and histories of marginalized in interpreting archaeology. And I think this is also something that a lot of archaeologists in different parts of the world are doing. So of course, that's part of the decolonization process, or doing decolonized archaeology.
So I know it's hard to reach all parts of the population, as even maybe the population, partly because of the technical language of a lot of archaeology publications, the fact that a lot of it is in English. And initially, when you were talking about your photo document idea instead of site reports, I thought that's such a good idea, and we should do that too, because we have that problem all the time where we're trying to share our findings, disseminate them with landowners or people just that are part of the excavation teams, and it's hard because the jargon's very hard for people to understand.
So I'm thinking of a series of books that would cater to young children um, of different age groups, of different grade levels. And of course, that entails learning the language to what vocabulary would a 4-year-old understand, what vocabulary or what words would a 10-year-old would understand. So I think working with creative writers, working with psychologists, child psychologists also would help in creating those books. So the key really now is to reach out to the young generation because they will be the future of the Philippines, of the world. And if you can influence how they do archaeology, I think the discipline would benefit from it.
Awesome. I know my 3-year-old son would love a pop-up book about archaeology. I can't believe I never really thought to look into doing something like that. So you just kind of touched upon it there at the end, for young students or young individuals looking to become involved in archaeology, do you have any recommendations for them in terms of volunteering or classes to take as an undergraduate, anything like that?
I don't recommend a specific background for a young student who wants to do archaeology. In fact, we have observed that many of our students in ASP right now come from different backgrounds, and I think their backgrounds enrich the practice of archaeology because the research topics that they come up with, they vary a lot, and they tend to link archaeology with the backgrounds that they have, therefore creating a unique discussion of the relationship of archaeology to other fields. I think students who would like to enter archaeology should improve their reading and writing skills because we do read a lot of articles, um, and some of these articles can be very technical. We also are required to write a lot of reports, so they need to brush up on those skills. And I think it would also help if the students have a sense of adventure, if they have a cheerful disposition, and a sense of community. Recently, I read something on social media that says people from people from the West or Western people, they think of rights, whereas indigenous peoples think of obligations. So if we have a sense of obligation to different stakeholders, to different public, to different sectors, then we would be able to bridge the gap between the public and archaeology and highlight the significance of why archaeology as a discipline is important.
So that's actually it for the questions we had written down, but I wanted to know if there was anything is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet that we could ask about?
I can't think of any at the moment. But if you want to ask more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Actually, I have a question. What is your background? I mean, it might not even be interesting, but it looks like something maybe archaeological or like.
No, I finished a BA in linguistics. I really want. So I mentioned that I really wanted to be an archaeologist when I was still in the grade school level, but there was no archaeology course in any of the university when I entered college, and I thought linguistics was the closest one. I knew there was an anthropology course, but I think the description of linguistics in the encyclopedia that I read was more exciting than the description of anthropology. That's why I chose linguistics. So after finishing my undergraduate degree in linguistics, I did a couple of units in the MA anthropology in the same university, and they had in that department they had I think a few archaeology courses, and I became acquainted with the professors, and that's when I learned that they were going to opened an archaeology degree. So after a year of doing a master's in anthropology, the ASP opened, and then I decided to transfer to ASP. And since then, I'm with the ASP. So the Dr. Mijares, the one who headed the project on the discovery of the Homo lusinensis, so we belong to the same batch, and we are the first batch of the Archaeological Studies Program.
The Archeo quiz this time is, Bob, you have to guess which of these statements about Grace is not true. Some of them will be a little obvious because of the interview. So A, she has dogs. That's obviously true. B, she's published a book. C, she was part of the very first batch of students of the Archaeological Studies Program, which we just learned is true. D, she used to host an outdoor adventure television show. Or E, she has contributed to the Philippine Star newspaper. So which of these is not true?
I'm going to guess D, host of an outdoor adventure show.
I think. Is that, I didn't know if you ever hosted a show, but I didn't see that when I Googled your name. So I assumed you hadn't done that.
No, but there was a time when an outfit in Singapore came to the Philippines because they wanted to do a reality show on but then after the interview they didn't get back to me anymore. So maybe they found another one, or but I don't think the show progressed to anything. So
I can't believe I was almost right about
almost
that.
right.
Well, so I think that's it. I was trying to ask you earlier, the Zoom background you have, is that something, is this Zoom background something with the Philippine archaeology, or is it just like a nice pattern?
The Zoom background. So the round one is the logo of the University of the Philippines, mm-hmm. and the jar is the logo of the Archaeological Studies Program. So this jar is it's not a burial jar, but it's a votive jar, and it was found in a cave from Mindanao. And I know it's not obvious here, but the scroll design is distinctly Southeast Asian. It's common in Southeast Asian jars, and this is associated with secondary jar burials, anthropomorphic jar burials.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's such a nice image in the background.
So how long is the ASP? What has been 10, 15 years?
26.
26.
We celebrated our 26th anniversary last August.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. The 1990s were like 10 years ago still. I feel the same way.
There was no way they were 30. That's okay. That's really cool. All right. So then, so still new, but doing some great things, obviously, some really interesting discoveries. And it sounds like you guys have a lot of great plans for the future to really build up archaeology in the country.
Well, I don't want to keep you much longer because it's actually getting pretty late over there, I realize. But thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks for taking the time to come talk with us.
Yes. Have a nice day.
You too. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.